Hello, and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sanseveri with my awesome co-host, Amy Cordell, and we just finished recording our first show back from the break. So even though we had a break, we pre-recorded a bunch of shows so that we didn't miss a beat on the podcast. But it occurred to me that I don't think that I introduced us in the last show. So if you listen to the last show and you're like, Penny really fumbled the beginning, it's because I'm feeling super brand new right now. But welcome back. Really excited to be recording. We have so much fun recording these shows. We really, really do. And I wanted to mention, Amy came up with a really good idea when we were in the green room that I am going to mention to you. It's challenging to post reviews on a lot of these podcast platforms. We've talked about this before. Apple certainly doesn't make it easy. So if you have a review, if you want to leave us a review, but you're having a hard time figuring out how to leave it on your desired listening portal, feel free to email it to us. And our email address is in the show notes, but it is info@amarketingexpert.com. So we love reviews. We're building out our podcast page on the website because our podcast has just gotten super popular. I got an email. I got a message on Facebook Messenger from somebody. I think she's in Australia. And she's like, oh my gosh, I just found your podcast. And I am plowing through all your content, which I love. I love hearing that people are discovering it and how they're discovering it and stuff like that. So it's really, really cool. So the idea for the show is really new. Even though we've been doing this podcast for 4 years, we've literally never done a podcast based on a popular blog post. And Amy, you came to me with this. Tell our listeners why you thought this was a great idea.
Well, it was kind of exciting. You're right. We've never done it this direction before, which is kind of fun. But this is one of our most popular blog posts, and it's shown up for different searches, different inquiries on the first page of Google for a very long time, which is always very exciting for us. Anyway, but then to have a post be so popular, and as I was going through it, I was like, okay, I love just that it's popular, but I do check these out because I am curious, like, what about this post is different from some of the other things that we do? And what stood out to me is that it just felt like a really well-rounded approach for getting your head wrapped around marketing and branding and running your platform, because it can get so overwhelming. But this post just really kind of breaks it down into what feels like a much more manageable system for ensuring you're kind of staying on top of your game and doing most of all the right things. You know what I mean? Like, it really hits on a bunch of different notes, because I know we've got listeners that don't want to be on social media. We've got listeners that aren't comfortable doing like podcast interviews. Like, we talk to authors all the time that kind of are like, okay, these are deal breakers for me. I'm not interested in that. I don't think I'm good at it, whatever the reasoning is. And we get it. Not everybody can do all the things. But when I read through this list, I was like, you know what? This is a decent list that is pretty applicable to a lot of authors out there. And I thought that's pretty rare to have, one resource that really almost any author can go, okay, I can go through this list and find a few things that I could be doing better.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And I agree with you. And I was really pleased when you found this blog post, because you're right. We've never done this in reverse. We've never had a blog post, which I think has been up for a while.
Yeah, I think this is one of those that it's kind of like I like to refer to it like a sourdough starter blog post, where it may have originated a while ago, but we've made a point because, again, when y'all tell us you like something, we pay attention. So it is one of those, I think, that we may have updated, you know what I mean, over time to make sure that it stays really current and applicable to what, the current market needs and things like that. Because
right.
So I love that. So yay. When y'all we pay attention, we can see this stuff. When you pull up certain posts that we've done, certain shows that we've done, topics, things like that, believe me, we are paying attention to which shows you gravitate toward, which blog posts you gravitate toward. And that really does help us kind of determine what you're looking for, what kind of direction, what kind of help you need, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's rare that a single blog post really addresses uniformly the majority of things that every author needs to do, because every genre is different. Every author, authors have different goals, blah, 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 everything. But the first one, which we ironically just did a show on this last week. So if you haven't listened to the show, it's a deep dive into this topic. Define your target market. So defining your target market means figuring out who you're writing for. It's a very basic thing. And it's kind of crazy how many times as authors we jump into this without really knowing who we're writing the book for. And I did this 24 years ago, and I talked about the example. I won't repeat it on this one. You can go back and listen to that show. And learn from me, learn from what I did and my mistake. You really have to know who your target, who your reader is exactly, not just a group of, oh, well, my reader is probably female, but could also be male, and they're somewhere between the ages of 18 and 88. It's like, that's not a defined market at all. And I've had that happen where I'm like, well, so what, and I blame Harry Potter for this, because a lot of times it has to do with, I know, poor Harry, but a lot of times it has to do with an author who has a book that is similar in genre. So they're looking at Harry Potter and they're like, oh, well, but Harry Potter, like my grandmother reads Harry Potter, so Harry Potter is interesting to everybody. But it never starts out that way. It never, and Chicken Soup for the Soul is a really interesting example. These guys, and I remember they did a talk, one or both of them did a talk, two separate occasions that I listened to, which I just found fascinating. And when you think of Chicken Soup for the Soul, I mean, it's like a household name, right? At this point, when they started, they were hyper focused on who their reader was. For example, right? When you think about Chicken Soup for the Soul, you're like, well, everybody reads Chicken Soup for the Soul. Well, even now, as popular as it is, that's not actually true, right? The Chicken Soup for the Soul reader tends to be female. They tend to be a little bit older. I'm betting Amy does not have a Chicken Soup for the Soul book in her house. I'm just thinking out loud, only because age-wise, Amy's not really their target market, right? Another piece of their target market are readers who shop at Hallmark, which I know sounds kind of crazy, right? But absolutely, they knew who their target market was, and they stayed hyper focused on that target market. And from there, the book then grew into this series. And now you have Chicken Soup for the Plumber's Soul and the Horse Lover's Soul and the whatever soul. Right? I mean, it's the craziest brand, expansion, but it's also one of the most interesting. So if you get a chance to see one of their talks online, I don't know if they do a lot of public speaking anymore. I think one of them lives in Aruba or something. Really, that's what Chicken Soup for the Soul will buy you, a beautiful house in Aruba. But see if you can see some of their talks online. Sorry, Amy, do you have a Chicken Soup for the Soul book? Did I just throw you under the bus?
No, I do not. And I appreciate that you said it was because of my age and not because of any psychological proclivities.
Now, the kind of Chicken Soup Soul book that Amy would have, Chicken Soup for the Crime Lover's Soul, you'd have that one, right? You'd buy that one. Would you buy that one?
Oh, see, that could be cute.
Right?
Yeah.
True Crime Soul.
That would be adorable.
Right. True Crime Lover's Soul. All right. So I'm done with my first one. I'm sorry that I rambled. But anyway, go ahead.
No, it's amazing. But no, it's very true. That target market thing, it really, I mean, I know a lot of authors really get into that when they're writing their book. but the kind of questions and answers you do for writing a book versus marketing a book are very different. So I'm so glad we revisited the reader profile brainstorm, marketing on it. And y'all, we will make an announcement when that comes out, when we re-release it out into the wild once it's fully updated, because
Oh yeah, for
that's
sure.
a priority. Yeah, we'll definitely let y'all know. The next one, establish an online presence. And I realize some people are going to groan at this. I apologize in advance. It's kind of one of those sorry, not sorry things, but you really do need to have an online presence. This means setting up a website, creating a social media account or accounts. Most people don't need multiple. We've done episodes on that before, so we won't go too far into that. But we've talked about you need to be where it matters. You don't need to be on every social account to be successful. You don't need to be on any. We've also done shows on that. But truly, though, you do need to be online, because that is really where you're going to capture the most impressions, where you're going to find new readers. Love it, hate it, it's a reality. Websites, very basic websites, simple, easy to use, have gotten so much simpler to pull up and start. Truly, if it sounds scary, give it a shot. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars on a website anymore just to have what I like to refer to as a home base. But it really does. I mean, and I think, Penny, we've talked about this a lot before. You show people how seriously to take you.
Yeah.
I hope that's not offensive. You know what I mean? But so having a website, even if it's very basic, where it's just your bio and you let them know your background a little bit, you update it when you release a new book, and then you have a basic contact me. It shows you take yourself seriously. It shows you take your brand seriously and that you are here to stay. And that makes such a big difference when people are thinking whether or not they want to spend money on your products. So take yourself seriously. Look into getting even a very basic, simple website. The social media thing, again, we've done multiple shows on that, so I won't spend too long on that. But truly, for this, again, ties into Penny's point, depending on who your reader market is, depending on how you fill out that reader profile and what you discover while doing that, it may be in your best interest to be on at least one social media site and put some time and effort into just being a brand on there. Don't look at it as I need to get on there to sell books, because you're going to be disappointed if that's the only reason you show up to social media. But if you show up to connect with people and to find new readers and to be interesting, you'll probably get a lot more out of it. So that's another piece that really, you want to wrap your head around and get comfortable with.
Yes.
You got to get comfortable with, you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because eventually you get past that. And all of a sudden it's this thing that's actually working for you, when 6 months ago you were like, I'll never be on social media. I don't have time for that. It's awful. But you might be pleasantly surprised if you approach it in the right way.
Right, exactly. And I think I didn't mean to interrupt what you were saying, but your points were so well made. I mean, you cannot show up to social media to sell books, full stop. You have to show up to connect with people, which brings us to number 3, which is building a fan base with email marketing. Now, I get a lot of pushback on this, because people are just like, well, I don't know if I want to email marketing. I don't know what to say. It sounds, and I'm sorry if I'm doing the voice, but come on, y'all know you know who you are. You know who you are. I get it. When I first had my newsletter, I was just like, well, I guess I could talk about my dog. And I didn't. Probably should have, because I'm pretty sure what I did in the email newsletter was just like, people were like, who is this person, and how fast can I unsubscribe from this trash, because I don't even know what she's saying. One of the things that I have talked to authors over and over and over again about this topic, the difference between success and the lack thereof is obviously a lot of things. And we spend a lot of time on this podcast addressing each of those things. I don't want to say that it's one of the biggest, but it's definitely at the top tier, right up there with book covers and knowing who your readers are. You got to build a fan base with email marketing. It doesn't mean you have to write them every day. It doesn't mean that you could just write them once a month. You want to get people to sign up for something on your website. There was an author that did this, and I want to say this was maybe 2 years ago. So she was traditionally published. She decided she was going to independently publish her book. She had been building her fan base for a while, right? So she wasn't just all of a sudden going to start with her self-published book. She had been building her fan base for a while. When she launched her book, within 48 hours, she had 4,000 ratings and reviews. So it was a combination of, because Amazon, I guess Amazon's still allowing ratings, which infuriates both Amy and myself. But 4,000 within 48 hours. The reason for that was her fan base. So your fan base, and we've done separate shows on this, so definitely go back through some of the older shows because the information is still very, very valid. Your fan base will help you from book to book to book. And when I have authors, especially who are going to write multiple books, doesn't necessarily have to be in a series, I love having conversations with them about growing your fan base, right? And we've done shows on newsletters, so I don't want to spend too much time on, oh, what am I going to put in a newsletter? Because I get it. But start by putting a letter in the back of your book, inviting readers to connect with you directly. And I'm pretty sure that Amy is going to pop the link to this blog post in the show notes, because there are two links, actually. There's several links in this post, but two of them in particular. One of them is maximizing your newsletter success. So we don't have to go too far down the rabbit hole on that, but put a letter in the back of your book, drive people to contact you, give them something, exclusive access to. It doesn't have to be, like you're not bribing them. Here's the $5 gift card from Amazon. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is give them a reason to contact you at the end of the book, because Amazon's never going to release the data on who bought your book. But you can get people to contact you, and you won't know everybody who bought your book because not everybody's going to click that link to write you. But a lot of people will, and you could potentially be really surprised. So that's my spiel on fan base and email marketing. Regardless of your genre, it will benefit you in many, many, many ways.
Absolutely. And, now I'm kind of understanding like why this post resonates so much, because I feel like it should be funny that I'm laughing like, wow, we did a really good job on this. And I'm just shocked.
Oh my gosh,
how well
they edit that out. They sounded really surprised when they wrote a good blog post.
But I'm surprised at how well these play off each other, because the next one we have is get more book reviews. And the timing is really impeccable, because I've actually had this conversation with a handful of clients just in the last couple of weeks, Penny. These are clients that are debut authors. Books are relatively new, last couple months. They're chomping at the bit to, see momentum pick up. We get it. It's super exciting. And I've had the conversation with them about reviews. We're doing our thing, but you need to tap into your network and get your people interested in your book. And I think this plays perfectly off of your last point about keeping that newsletter going, keeping that communication going with people that are in your sphere, because you need access to them. And, a couple of the authors wrote back and they were immediately like, they're like, I'm on it. I hadn't even thought of that. Yes, I will start reaching out to people. They asked very smart questions about what are the right and wrong ways to go about getting reviews from people and we did an episode on that as well. So you guys can find that in past episodes. We did it this season, talking about kind of do's and don'ts, best practices for Amazon reviews and things like that. But it really does matter, because people like what other people like. There's a lot of things you can't control in this industry, but number one is you can't control when people will decide to spend their money. So kind of, the whole sales thing, everybody wants to sell books. Penny wants to sell books. We want our clients to sell books. We all know that's the goal, but it can't be the focus, because it'll take you nowhere. So focus on the things you can control. And so doing that outreach to your network, to people and try to remind them, drum up reviews, remind them how much it means to you. I think that's a piece that a lot of authors forget about, Penny, is that they just think of it as begging for reviews. But I think a lot of people they forget how much it means to authors to leave reviews.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we
Yeah.
all know it's a good thing and it's a nice thing to do, but truly coming from an actual author and getting that message and just reminding them like how much it would mean for you and how much can help your book to post a review when you get a moment, when you get done reading it. I think a lot of authors would be surprised at the conversions that they get out of that kind of outreach.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I just want to highlight something really brilliant that you said. Not that you just talked for 5 minutes and not everything was brilliant, Amy. One thing that really stood out to me, book sales is always the goal, but it should not be the focus. I thought that was like so inspired. I want to put that
But
on the
it's very,
t-shirt.
there we go. And
Right?
we've talked about it in many roundabout ways, about goal setting and things like that. And so it's like, it's definitely something that we have discussed before, but it truly is like to say that to be so focused on sales doesn't actually give you any actionable things that you can do to move that needle, other
Yeah.
than refreshing, your sales data on the back end of Amazon, which is a quick way to drive yourself insane. So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I agree with that totally. But I just thought what you said, we need to put that on a bumper sticker or something because that was extremely well said. Reach out to book groups. So I love this in particular. And it doesn't, so when you think about book groups, you always think about, well, the women they meet at somebody's living room and they have like little hors d'oeuvres and they're reading some fiction book or something like that. That's not always the case. So expand your thinking on book groups. Yes, they could be traditional book clubs. Absolutely. They could be online clubs if you have something that is relevant to what their club is about, right? Um, Meetups are a good example of online clubs, right? So getting yourself, pitching yourself to a meetup that has a topic that's related to, or maybe it's just a meetup group of, like-minded individuals, whatever that might be that you want, you know what I mean? So, um,
back to that their profile brainstorm,
back to
kind
that,
of.
yeah, back to that reader profile, right? Exactly. It's a great way for you to connect with readers, gain exposure, promote your books, all of that good stuff. You can do some research online if you're just popping into this conversation about book groups, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I was just thinking about the book groups that meet up at, blah, blah, or whatever. Like our local YMCA, they actually have various authors come in and talk to their group. Now um, they have parents, they have moms, they have teenagers, they have lots of programs for senior citizens. So they have a variety of people that you could speak to. So it's not just the women meeting in a living room having hors d'oeuvres and talking about a book. Book groups are so much bigger than that. So that's also something to think about. And we've done a podcast rather on non-traditional ways to market books. And the other thing is too, is I started this talking about book groups, but schools doing Zoom talks at schools around the country, if schools are your target market, things like that. There's always an opportunity to talk about your book. You just have to kind of dig in and get creative with it. And it is a great way to build your direct reader audience too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the groups, and we use this statistic a lot. We mentioned it in our reader profile brainstorm, but Penny, you mentioned in our last episode, the majority of books are bought via word of mouth. So that's another important part about this group, concept of you just need to get the attention of one person, and if you catch their attention and you appeal to them, that's what this group option, it's bigger than just, oh, I want my book to be a part of a book club. I mean, that's very cool. But connecting with these groups that really make sense, all of a sudden you've got 5, 10, a couple dozen, depending on the group, people that now know about your book and are talking about your book. And that is, you can't really put a price on that,
Yeah.
That is such a huge accomplishment. And it's just by making, some direct one-on-one connections with people.
Yeah, exactly. No, I completely agree with that.
Okay, so our next one, all right, pitching influencers. We've done a lot of shows on pitching, but it is, I will say it is, so I'm not going to go into this too much, but I will say just, I've even noticed, and it's kind of always been a thing, Penny, but again, like it, sometimes we see things come up in waves with client campaigns and questions that clients ask. And I will say this kind of influencer, genre influencer, topic influencer marketing is something that a lot of authors still are not comfortable with. They're not comfortable. A lot of authors are not comfortable saying, I wrote something amazing and this is why you should care.
Yeah.
And it still kind of blows my mind how much time and effort, blood, sweat, tears, all the cliche things that go into producing and getting a book out there to then still be so humble or timid or embarrassed to say, I did something incredible. Here's 5 reasons why you should give a dang. And and I think we can collaborate. I would love to send you a book. Here's what I'd like to talk about. I'd love to do a guest post. Let's do an interview. You know what I mean? Taking that next proactive step in saying, I've got something to offer and here's why it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And this is another one of those, I think, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. If this is not something that you're used to doing, if you're not used to talking up yourself or, reaching out and being proactive about the time and effort you've put into your book, in your brand, and again, what you have planned for the future in terms of additional titles you plan on releasing or where you plan on taking your business. All of these things are very unique to you, and you need to make sure that you connect with people that might resonate with them. And so those, again, if you write fiction, those are genre influencers. Those are people that are are the ones that other people go to for recommendations. Like Penny, you mentioned in, a previous episode, you have a neighbor that's always asking you, okay, what's the latest book? That's fantastic. You want to get in touch with these people that are helping other people determine what books they read and buy. And again, same thing if you write nonfiction, those are other thought leaders that they've already kind of gained that traction and that momentum within your topic. You want to start networking with those people, figure out if you can do an interview, provide a guest post. There's so many different ways to collaborate. I see this a lot now, Penny, even as simple as like guest posts on social media, even, where someone else will provide a few tips that somebody will share on their social media account. I mean, that is such a simple thing to do. Simple in terms of logistics for the person
Mhm.
that's sharing for you, that's giving you that coverage. So it could be something relatively small like that still gets you a lot of new exposure to the right kind of people. And so I think that is something for your long-term marketing plan. Everybody listening, you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable talking about yourself and talking yourself up to people that have the ability to really kind of skyrocket your exposure.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. And I think one of the first things that you can do if you wanted to dip your toe into, influencer marketing, just start to follow people and comment on their posts. It's much easier to create a connection when it's not necessarily a cold connection, meaning you just kind of popped onto Instagram. You're like, oh, this person looks great. I'm going to target them. I'm going to post something in the comments. Hey, I have a book. Would you like consider my book? You're much better off spending a little bit of time following them, commenting, um, familiarizing yourself with their posts and what they like. And it feels less, because I know a lot of authors say, well, that just feels icky when I have to promote myself and pitch myself. Like, I get it, but that feels less awkward to get to know them a little bit. And like I said, to kind of use that to introduce yourself to them. Okay. Run Amazon advertising. We don't need to spend a ton of time on this, but and it's not so much because I'm sitting here telling you want to make Amazon rich, but you really, um, I, when authors tell me that they're advertising on social media, it's like, well, that's fine. I hope that it's working out for you. But keep in mind that social media, every time that you ask someone to click, you lose 20% of your audience. And that is this isn't something that I just made up for this podcast. That is a scientific proven every click you lose 20%, which is why people say, like on your website, you don't want to have too many pages, because if you make people click, 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 you've lost 20% or potentially more of your audience, right? When a consumer goes to Amazon, they are going there to buy something. That is the only purpose, generally. Unless you're just digging around Amazon, unless you're like me and you're in Costco and you're looking at something and then you're looking on Amazon for the reviews, picking it up in Costco anyway. I realize I'm a little bit of an outlier. Isn't it funny how I managed to weave Costco in every podcast?
I love it.
I'm such a nut. I can't believe they haven't made, talking about influencers. Hello, I'm an influencer waiting to happen. Anyway, back to the conversation. Amazon advertising, start with one ad. You don't have to necessarily move into, well, I'm just going to run 3 ads and I'm going to have a budget of $100 a day. If Amazon ads makes you uncomfortable, I do have a book out on how to run Amazon ads. See, there's me being all super self-promotional. That wasn't too awkward, was it? Probably was.
No, it was perfect.
Thank you. But the idea really is that you want to just dip your toe in the Amazon advertising, put a budget cap of, if you only feel comfortable spending $50 a month or $100 a month. Amazon ads is helpful not just to get your book in front of prospective readers, but it's also helpful for your optimization of your book, for the visibility. I mean, I get it. It seems daunting, but get my book. There I go again, and start to dip your toe into Amazon advertising. You'll really be glad you did.
Yep, I agree, Penny. We get that question a lot about the ads, and that's what we share with clients. Like, this is it really is a relatively, and again, it's more complex than I'm making it sound. You do have to do your research. You have to understand how these work. But once you understand that, it is a relatively simple, straightforward way to keep the Amazon machine working for you ongoing.
Yeah.
In ways that are very hard to mimic with other types of marketing efforts that, literally pull you away multiple times a week to do things, So that is one thing about Amazon ads that I think authors forget, is that how much exposure they can generate for you once you get everything set up and running smoothly, which does take time. But the great part about that is that you do have this Amazon machine getting in front of readers for you ongoing, which is very hard to do. Okay, so the next one I want to do is participate in events. And here I am telling people uncomfortable things again. This means going out of the house and talking to people about your book. But, these can be, get creative. These could be book signings, book fairs. I live in an area where there's a lot of local community events that happen. Our downtown is it's not huge, but it has a lot of events happening. We've got a great local parks and rec system that does a lot of fun things. Just get out there and get involved, because you end up chatting with people, and then you end up getting to say, oh, I'm an author. I can't tell you how much headway you can make by talking about the fact that you're an author and getting out there and doing a little personal PR, and go and participate in events that interest you. There's no reason, you can't be doing something you enjoy and also introducing yourself to business owners and other people in the community. And this isn't about like, oh, I've tried to get book events and I keep getting turned down. It's not about having your own party, which those are awesome too. But I really mean like just participating in things going on around town. That means going to your local library, introducing yourself to the librarian. I mean, there's trivia nights at a lot of I could go on and on, because I love participating in local events, because I want those things to always be offered in my area. So I always feel like people put time and effort into setting these things up. I'm going to show up and show my support. But Penny, I know you have a couple tips for local as well, because it's such an underused strategy by the majority of authors.
Well, and local media loves local authors. So let's just start there. They love their local authors. If you have an event that you're doing locally, maybe it's in it's at a library or a bookstore, and it's free, your local media definitely wants to hear from you. So that's something that across the board, authors can do for sure. The other thing with local is your local independent bookstores, and hopefully, and it doesn't necessarily, okay, so I said bookstores, it doesn't necessarily have to be a bookstore. It can be a local, like if you have a curious shop, or if you have, I've done events in Hallmark stores. I mean, I've done them in, if you listen to this podcast and you heard me rattle off all the different places, get to know what we call your local influencers. Your local influencers, meaning your local media, your local libraries, local independent bookstores, local bookstores. Most of us have more independence now than we do like Barnes and Nobles, even though Barnes and Noble is expanding again, which is anytime a bookstore expands, you'll get a high five from me because I think that's awesome. But your local market is something that authors very, very often overlook. And I think it's worth exploring that, especially if you haven't done that yet, right? Drop off a copy of your book to a local anchor, watch your local news and see who does, these feel-good feature stories, that kind of thing. Unless your book is a really hard news, you're definitely not going to want to target your hard news anchor. But it's an overlooked market for a lot of authors because the local stuff doesn't always feel that sexy. Well, I want to go national. Well, look, we all want these big things, but a lot of times these big goals start with incremental steps and building your platform, and local is definitely a great way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say anytime I see a local author at an event, a market, anything like that, 99% of the time I buy the book, unless it's completely just outside of my wheelhouse. But I do it anyway, I've bought children's books that are technically too young for my kiddos now, just because, yes, good for you. You are out here doing the thing. Give me a book. You know what I mean? Sign that. This is amazing. 100%. I always go out of my way to make sure that I chat with and support local authors when they're out there, doing the hard thing.
Yeah, exactly. No, I completely agree with that. We hope that this has been helpful. I want to remind you again, I know we ask for reviews. I know that sometimes it's challenging to post a review on some of these podcast portals. If you're challenged with it, but you want to let us know what you think about the podcast, feel free to shoot us an email. Our contact details are in the show notes. We also love show ideas. So if you think about it, you think, oh my gosh, I wonder if Amy and Penny would want to do a show on this, feel free to shoot us over an email, because a lot of times these do get incorporated into our ideas and our upcoming shows. So thank you again so much for listening. It's great to be back. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.